Don't touch that paper. Daniel Mercer's hand froze above his battered red toolbox as Lily's folded drawing slid open across the metal tray. A child's picture filled one side. On the other, beneath a blue signature, ran the engine schematic marked DM-17. Adrian Vale crossed the garage too quickly and reached for it. Evelyn Hart caught his wrist before he could. Lily tightened both hands around her red pencil. I only wanted to thank him, she whispered. 3 hours earlier, Mill Creek Community Garage smelled of hot rubber, old coffee, and the faint metallic sweetness of coolant. Fluorescent tubes buzzed above the repair bays, but one light near Daniel's station flickered half a beat behind the others, turning every moving wrench into a broken shadow. Daniel stood beneath a raised pickup, listening to an uneven vibration through the handle of his ratchet. He was 39, lean from long hours rather than exercise, wearing a faded navy work shirt with the sleeves rolled above his scarred wrists. His steel-toed boots had been resoled twice. The red toolbox beside him had belonged to no one important, which was why he trusted it. Important things, he had learned, were often the first things powerful people claimed. Dad! Noah called from the folding table near the garage office. The 9-year-old held up a small relay sealed in clear plastic. He had saved for it by skipping the snack line at school and helping Sam Ortiz sweep the waiting room on Saturdays. Can we install it tonight? Daniel looked at the part, then at his son's hopeful face. Tonight, he promised. Noah smiled and tucked it beside his unfinished model car. Across the garage, workers hung a white banner for the afternoon event. Vale Future Engineers. Ideas belong to everyone. Adrian Vale moved beneath it in a charcoal suit without a trace of grease, greeting mechanics by name while an assistant photographed every handshake. His voice was warm, his smile carefully measured. When he passed Daniel's bay, he paused just long enough to glance at the toolbox. Still keeping old experiments in there, Mercer? He asked. Daniel tightened the final bolt beneath the truck. Mostly tools. Adrian's smile remained in place, but his eyes did not. Near the entrance, a woman in a plain camel coat arrived with Lily. Daniel had seen wealthy donors before. They entered expecting the room to rearrange around them. This woman did not. She stayed near the glass doors, watching more than speaking, one hand resting on the thin gold chain at her throat. Lily carried a dented model car against her chest and a red pencil behind one ear. She approached the stem table, but Adrian's assistant barely looked at the scorched wheel before directing her toward a stack of coloring sheets. The engineers are preparing real equipment right now, sweetheart. Lily lowered her eyes. Daniel heard the words from 2 bays away. He also heard the tiny click when the girl's damaged wheel tried to turn and failed. He wiped his hands on the white-stitched rag Noah had repaired for him and stepped toward her, but Adrian called after him with polished concern. Daniel, let the program staff handle the children. We have procedures for a reason. Daniel stopped. For one breath, only the flickering light moved. Then he looked at Lily, not Adrian. Procedures should help people, he said quietly. Not teach them they are in the way. Hours later, when Lily's folded thank you drawing opened inside his toolbox and Adrian named it an internal company file before anyone had identified it, Daniel's fingers found the diagonal pencil mark beside the thermal valve. The mark was small, almost invisible beneath the blue signature, and Daniel knew no one else had ever drawn it that way. Daniel's thumb remained over the diagonal pencil mark, the tiny slant he had once used to remind himself where heat would turn dangerous. Adrian's hand hovered above the drawing. Evelyn's fingers still circled his wrist. For one suspended second, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than anyone's breathing. Step away from the toolbox, Adrian said. The paper stays here, Evelyn replied, and the child stays out of this. Adrian released a soft, practiced laugh, as though everyone had misunderstood an act of concern. He smoothed the cuff of his charcoal suit and looked toward Marcus Reed, whose phone remained raised over the drawing, recording both sides. The garage smelled of motor oil and hot rubber, but Adrian carried a clean cedar cologne that seemed almost unnatural beside the stained concrete and rusted lift arms. Of course, he said. My only concern is protecting Lily. We have a distressed employee, a confidential document, and a child who may not understand how she became involved. Distressed employee. The phrase landed gently, almost kindly, and that made it worse. Daniel lifted his eyes from the paper. I'm not distressed. You dropped a wrench. I recognized a mark. That is exactly the kind of claim we should avoid making in front of a minor. 3 sentences, each quieter than the last. Around them, mechanics stopped pretending to organize tools. A photographer lowered his camera. Near the office window, Sam Ortiz stood beside a stack of unpaid invoices, rubbing his thumb over the edge of the top page until the paper curled. Adrian turned to the room with the measured patience of a man explaining an unpleasant policy. Daniel Mercer submitted several informal concepts to heart mobility years ago. None met the standards required for development. He was informed of that in writing. His assistant opened a tablet and displayed an old email beneath the heart mobility logo. Daniel's name sat in the subject line. The body thanked him for his interest, described his submission as incomplete, and wished him success elsewhere. Adrian did not show the attachment Daniel had sent with it. He did not show the diagrams. He showed only the rejection. That's not the whole file, Daniel said. Adrian tilted his head. It is the company's official response. I said it isn't the whole file. And this is neither the time nor the proper forum for an ownership dispute. The words were polished enough to sound reasonable. Daniel stood in a faded work shirt with grease darkening one shoulder, while Adrian spoke beneath a banner promising opportunity to everyone. 2 donors near the coffee station glanced from Daniel's worn boots to the glossy tablet and made their decision without saying it aloud. One whispered that mechanics sometimes became attached to ideas they did not understand. Another wondered whether Daniel had planted the drawing himself. Noah heard them. His small hand closed around the wrench he had returned to the toolbox, but Daniel touched 2 fingers to his son's wrist. Not a warning, a reminder. Noah slowly let go. Lily stood beside Evelyn with the red pencil held against her chest. He didn't ask me for it, she said. Adrian softened his expression immediately. I know, sweetheart. No one is blaming you. You said he was using me. I said adults sometimes make complicated choices. Lily looked down, as if the correction had somehow made her responsible for misunderstanding him. Daniel saw it happen, the way a child could be pushed out of her own story by someone speaking more smoothly. He stepped half a pace forward, then stopped before anyone could call the movement threatening. Ask me whatever you want, he said, but don't question her like she did something wrong. Adrian folded his hands. No one is questioning her. We are trying to protect her from a situation she cannot evaluate. Then stop explaining her intentions for her. The garage went still. Evelyn looked at Daniel more carefully, not with trust, but with the first trace of uncertainty. He had not asked who she was. He had not demanded payment, recognition, or access to corporate records. He had only placed himself between Lily and the adults controlling the language around her. Adrian's assistant whispered something into his ear. Adrian nodded, then spoke to Sam. The safest course is to remove Mr. Mercer from the demonstration area until our legal team can review the document. Your funding agreement allows us to suspend support if the program creates a reputational risk. Sam's eyes moved toward the office desk. Beneath the glass lay the electric bill, stamped past due in red. The community garage employed 6 people and repaired cars for families who could not afford dealership prices. Losing the grant would not hurt Adrian. It would close 2 service bays by winter. Daniel, Sam said, his voice rough, maybe you should clock out for today. Noah looked up at his father. Lily's pencil trembled slightly between her fingers. Daniel took his employee badge from his shirt pocket and set it beside the drawing. The plastic clicked against the metal toolbox. I'll leave if that keeps the garage open, he said. But Lily stays with her mother, and nobody calls her a liar. Adrian gave a restrained nod, as if granting a reasonable request. Security can escort you through the side door. He isn't being escorted anywhere, Evelyn said. Her voice remained calm, but the temperature of the room changed. She turned toward Daniel. You will stay while the document is photographed and logged. You will not touch the prototype engine or remove anything from this garage. Do you understand? Yes. And I am not saying I believe your claim. You shouldn't. Not yet. That answer made her pause. Marcus sealed the drawing inside a clear evidence sleeve and wrote the time across a white label. As he did, Noah crouched beside the open toolbox and noticed a burned piece of machined metal beneath the lower tray. The same letters were scratched along its edge. DM 17. Adrian saw it too. His expression held, but one finger moved to his silver cuff link. That prototype from the October submission proves nothing, he said. Daniel looked up slowly. The date on the drawing was still hidden beneath the fold, and no one in the room had said the word October. Evelyn's gaze shifted from Adrian to the sealed paper, then back again. How had he known the month? How did you know the month? Evelyn asked. Adrian's thumb paused against his silver cuff link, but only for a fraction of a second. Because I remember the complaint, he said. Because Mercer made sure everyone did. I never filed a complaint, Daniel replied. The sealed drawing lay between them beneath the fluorescent glare, its folded corner still hiding the date Adrian had somehow named. Marcus Reed wrote October on the evidence label without comment. Evelyn looked toward Lily, whose red pencil was pressed against her coat like something she might lose if she loosened her grip. Did Daniel ask you to put that paper in his toolbox? Lily shook her head. No. I wanted to give him a picture. Her voice was small, but it changed the direction of every eye in the garage. Daniel saw fear tighten her shoulders. Before Adrian could frame another careful question, he stepped beside the child and lowered his voice. You don't have to explain it twice. 3 hours earlier, the paper had meant nothing more than thank you. Lily sat on the concrete beneath the shadow of the second hydraulic lift, holding a dented model car in both hands. One wheel had stopped turning. A black mark spread across the clear plastic near the battery compartment, and each time she pressed the switch, something inside answered with a thin, defeated click. The STEM volunteers were arranging polished prototypes beneath white display lights. Their tables smelled of new plastic and fresh cardboard, nothing like Daniel's Bay, where hot oil, brake dust, and old coffee had settled into the walls. Lily waited until Adrian's assistant passed, then held up the car. It worked this morning. The assistant barely slowed. Set it on the repair table, sweetheart. Which one? Over there. She pointed toward a folding table already crowded with abandoned wires, broken kits, and coloring sheets. Lily looked at the table, then back at the woman. Will somebody fix it? We're preparing real equipment right now. The words were not cruel enough to draw attention. That was what made them effective. Lily lowered the model to her chest and moved out of the walkway. Daniel heard the failed relay click again. He was finishing a brake line on an old minivan whose owner had asked if she could pay half now and half after Friday. His own rent was due in 4 days. The envelope in his locker held $23 less than it needed to, and Noah's new relay sat unopened beside a model car the boy had been building since spring. Daniel wiped his hands on the white-stitched rag Noah had repaired and crossed the bay. Can I see it? Lily glanced toward the STEM table as though she needed permission from someone more important. Daniel crouched so she would not have to look up at him. Only if you want me to. She placed the car in his hands. The battery compartment was warm. One lead had been pinched beneath the plastic housing, and the relay had burned when the motor stalled. Daniel could have explained it in 30 seconds. Instead, he set the damaged part on a clean shop towel, placed a scrap of paper beside it, and handed Lily her red pencil. Show me what happened before it stopped. She drew 2 wheels, a line for the battery, then another line curling around the motor. Her circles were uneven, but the path made sense. Daniel watched her add a second route around the hot point, a child's version of a bypass. Something about it tugged at an old memory, but he let the thought pass. This was her car, not his past. Noah wandered over carrying the unopened relay. Is hers broken? Burned out, Daniel said. Do we have another one? Noah looked at the parts cabinet. Daniel already knew the answer. The garage stocked full-size automotive relays, not the small 12-volt piece Lily needed. The nearest hobby shop was 40 minutes away. Noah turned the package over in his hand. Through the plastic, the copper contacts shone beneath the overhead light. "We could use mine." Daniel did not reach for it. "You saved for that." Noah shrugged, though disappointment crossed his face before he could hide it. "Her project is tomorrow, right?" Lily nodded. "Mine isn't." Daniel studied his son for a moment. Since his wife's death, he had learned that fatherhood was often the art of not taking generosity from a child just because an adult could make the decision faster. "Are you sure?" Noah pressed the package into Daniel's palm. "We can save again." Daniel opened it carefully, keeping the cardboard backing intact so Noah could still use it for his parts journal. He replaced Lily's burned relay with the new one, repaired the pinched lead using a short piece of copper wire, and tested the circuit once. The wheel spun, then stopped when he lifted his thumb from the switch. "It works," Lily said. "Not yet." Daniel placed the small screwdriver in her hand and turned the car so the last screw faced her. "You finish it." Her fingers slipped on the handle at first. Noah steadied the model without touching the screw. Lily tried again, tightened it until the housing sat flush, then pressed the switch. The little car rolled across the stained concrete, veered around a drain, and bumped gently against Daniel's boot. For the first time that afternoon, Lily smiled without checking whether anyone was watching. Evelyn was watching. She stood near the glass entrance in a plain camel coat, one hand resting over the wedding ring hanging from a chain at her throat. She had seen Daniel ask Noah before using the relay. She had seen him return the screwdriver to Lily as though the final turn mattered. When she approached and opened her wallet, Daniel shook his head. "Please," she said, "at least let me replace the part. It belonged to my son. Then I should pay him." Noah looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Noah. "It was a gift," the boy said. Evelyn closed the wallet slowly. "You don't even know us." Daniel picked up the scorched relay and set it inside a small parts cup instead of throwing it away. "Didn't need to." Across the bay, Adrian had watched the model cross the floor. His expression held the warm approval expected from the founder of a community program, but his eyes settled on the wire Daniel had added. "Where did you learn to route a bypass like that?" he asked. Daniel wiped a smear of grease from the plastic shell. "The motor told me where it was getting hot." Adrian smiled. "That is a mechanic's answer." "It was a mechanic's problem." The assistant beside Adrian raised her phone and took a close photograph of the open circuit. She turned away immediately afterward, her thumb moving across the screen as she sent it to someone Daniel could not see. Adrian looked at the stack of reused paper beside Lily. "Those sheets should have been shredded." "They were in the children's supply box," Evelyn said. "Then someone stocked the wrong paper." His tone remained courteous, but he gathered the remaining pages himself. One sheet slipped free. Daniel caught it before it touched the oily floor and handed it to Lily with the clean side facing up. Faint blue lines showed through from the back, along with part of an internal printing code that had been cut off near the edge. Lily used it to draw Daniel beside Noah and the repaired red car. Then she folded the page so the technical side disappeared inside. No one praised Daniel. "No camera," recorded Noah giving up his relay. By evening, the minivan owner would still owe half her bill, the rent would still be short, and Noah's model would still be waiting for a part. Yet Lily carried the drawing to Daniel's battered toolbox and placed it beneath the top tray because he had made room for her when everyone else had made her feel like an interruption. And when her red pencil circled the blue signature on the hidden side, Evelyn finally understood that the evidence had reached Daniel only because he had been kind before there was anything to gain. The folded drawing had reached Daniel only because he had stopped to help a child no one else had time for. But kindness did not make the paper trustworthy. Evelyn stood beside Marcus Reed as he sealed it inside a clear evidence sleeve, her face composed again. The brief warmth Daniel had seen near Lily's repaired model replaced by the caution of someone responsible for thousands of employees and a company on the edge of a major investment. "The signature resembles mine," she said. "That does not prove when it was written." "Agreed," Daniel replied. Adrian turned slightly toward Marcus, relief hidden beneath professional concern. A reasonable position. Old signatures are easy to copy, and our archive drawings have circulated through contractors for years. The drawing was in Mom's paper box, Lily said. Evelyn looked down at her. Which paper box? The one by your desk. The pages you said were going away. Did anyone tell you to bring one here? No, Lily's fingers closed around the red pencil. I wanted clean paper. Adrian offered her a sympathetic smile. And that is why children should not be pulled into document disputes. She found discarded material and used it for a picture. There is no mystery in that. Daniel watched Evelyn absorb the explanation. It was plausible. A child had taken a sheet from a recycling stack. Daniel had once submitted ideas to Heart Mobility. He had recognized a familiar design printed on the reverse. From the outside, coincidence could look exactly like proof to a man who had spent 7 years needing proof. Evelyn turned to him. Did you ever have access to company files? After your rejection? No. Did anyone send you copies of the commercial design? No. Have you studied the patent since it became public? Daniel paused. Yes. Adrian's eyebrows lifted. A few people near the tool cabinets shifted their weight. The answer made Daniel's position weaker, and he knew it. Then you already knew what our system looked like, Evelyn said. Enough to recognize it, Daniel replied. Enough to reproduce part of it? Enough for you to ask that question. The overhead light flickered once, whitening the sealed paper and then dimming at the edges. Marcus placed the evidence sleeve flat on the stainless steel workbench. Oil stains had been scrubbed from the surface, but the metal still carried pale circular scars where hot parts had once rested. Adrian kept his hands folded. This is becoming unnecessarily personal. Mr. Mercer encountered a discarded copy of a public architecture, saw an old signature, and connected it to a grievance from his past. That does not make him dishonest. It makes him human. The kindness in Adrian's voice was sharper than an accusation. It allowed him to diminish Daniel while appearing to defend him. Daniel looked toward the sealed drawing. May I ask one question? Evelyn nodded. Why is the paper indented? Marcus leaned closer. Indented where? Daniel pointed without touching the sleeve. Below the signature. The surface isn't flat. Adrian answered before Evelyn could. Old technical paper picks up pressure marks. It may have been stored beneath handwritten notes. That's possible, Daniel said. Then let's see what the notes were. He crossed to his bay and brought back the long inspection lamp he used for finding dents in body panels. The lamp's plastic grip was darkened by years of grease, and one corner of its white reflector had been repaired with electrical tape. Daniel placed it low against the workbench, not over the paper but nearly level with it. Light traveled sideways across the sleeve. First, nothing changed. Then shallow ridges rose from the page like tracks beneath thin snow. Marcus angled his phone camera closer. Evelyn leaned in, one hand tightening around the gold chain at her throat. The marks were backward from their viewpoint, pressed into the paper by writing on a sheet that had once rested above it. Daniel shifted the lamp 2 inches, for words began to separate from the texture. Adrian stepped forward. You are contaminating the review. The paper is sealed, Marcus said. He hasn't touched it. The heat from that lamp could alter the sleeve. Daniel placed the back of his hand against the reflector. Lead. Barely warm. Adrian's jaw tightened and released. This proves only that someone wrote on a page above it. Then let it prove only that, Daniel said. Evelyn stared at the shallow lettering. She did not speak for several seconds. Turn the light farther left. Daniel obeyed. The first line became clearer. Meet inventor before cost review. Beneath it, partly lost in the fold, sat the beginning of a second notation and the tail of a date. Evelyn's breathing changed, not dramatically, but enough for Daniel to hear the small intake. That phrase, Marcus said, does it mean anything to you? Evelyn continued looking at the paper. It was how I marked submissions I wanted held before finance reduced the design. Adrian gave a controlled nod. Which supports my explanation. A rejected concept passed through preliminary review, was marked for discussion, and later abandoned. You said it never made it past intake, Daniel replied. I said the proposal did not meet development standards. You said I never got beyond the receiving desk. Semantics will not establish ownership. 3 quick replies. Then silence settled over the garage. The ventilation fan turned above them, pushing the smell of coolant and rain-damp air through the open service door. A drop of water fell from the undercarriage of the raised pickup and struck a drain grate with a hollow metallic tick. Daniel looked at Evelyn, not Adrian. You asked to meet the inventor. Apparently, you never met me. No. Then someone decided you shouldn't. Adrian exhaled through his nose. Or the submission was determined to be incomplete before a meeting could be scheduled. That happened constantly. Evelyn did not defend him. She did not defend Daniel either. She looked again at the blue signature, the pressure marks, and the red circle Lily had drawn around her name. We verify the paper stock, she said at last. We verify the ink if possible. We verify the prototype independently. Until then, no one has proven theft, authorship, or intent. Daniel nodded. Fair. He opened the lower tray of his toolbox. Noah had left the burned piece of machined metal exactly where he found it, nestled between a timing light and a roll of shop tape. Daniel lifted it by the edges. The housing was no larger than his palm, blackened at one end, with DM17 scratched across the side. One mounting hole sat slightly off-center. This is the object Adrian called the October prototype, Daniel said. Marcus should seal it too. Adrian's gaze moved to the crooked mounting hole. A damaged piece of metal does not become proprietary because someone scratches letters into it. No, Daniel said, but machining records have dates. On the inside lip, nearly hidden beneath soot, was a faint serial stamp from the shop that had milled the housing. Daniel did not wipe it clean. He stopped Noah when the boy reached for the white-stitched rag. Leave the dirt where it is, bud. Noah pulled his hand back. Because it matters? Because we don't know yet. Evelyn watched the exchange. Daniel was surrendering the only physical object that appeared to support his claim, and he was doing it before anyone promised it would be returned. Marcus placed the prototype in a second evidence bag and wrote the time beside Daniel's name. Along the outer edge of the housing, under the serial stamp, a phone number had been engraved so lightly it looked like a scratch. Sam recognized the area code. That was Harlan Machine Works, he said. Old place near the freight yard. Closed 6 years ago, Adrian replied immediately.
Sam frowned.
Owner still lives above the building. Adrian's face remained neutral, but his thumb found the silver cuff link again. Marcus dialed the faded number on speaker. It rang 4 times beneath the electric hum of the garage. A rough, elderly voice answered. Marcus identified himself and asked about the serial number. There was a long pause, followed by the sound of drawers opening somewhere on the other end. I remember that housing, the man finally said. Customer made me stamp his name inside because he said paper records had a way of disappearing. Marcus looked toward Daniel. What name? Another pause. Metal scraped against wood through the speaker. Daniel Mercer, the old machinist said. And if that piece still has the crooked bolt hole, I can tell you exactly what day I cut it. Tuesday, October 14th, the machinist said through Marcus Reed's phone. I cut that housing at 4:20 in the afternoon. Daniel Mercer paid cash because my card reader was down. The garage seemed to contract around the speaker. Someone near the folding chairs stopped dragging one across the floor. Daniel did not smile. He only lowered his eyes toward the evidence bag, where soot still clung to the crooked mounting hole of DM17. Do you still have the record? Marcus asked. Carbon invoice and material ledger. I never throw away tax paper. Adrian Vale gave a soft, patient exhale. A dated metal housing proves Mr. Mercer commissioned a component. It does not prove what was inside it, whether it worked, or whether it contributed to our commercial system. His tone carried no anger, only the reasonable caution of a man trying to keep a confused room from reaching an emotional conclusion. That's true, Daniel said. Adrian looked at him, briefly unsettled by the agreement. Evelyn Hart's hand came down slowly beside the sealed drawing. Have the invoice photographed and sent directly to Mr. Reed, she said. Not through Hart Mobility. Adrian turned toward her. Evelyn, outside records should go through counsel. They will, after Marcus receives the original image. The words were quiet, but Adrian's assistant was already reaching for her phone, as though Evelyn had issued more than a suggestion. Daniel noticed that. He also noticed Adrian notice him noticing it. Before either man spoke, a sharp metallic click came from the demonstration platform across the garage. Then another. The prototype engine shuddered against its mounts, its steady hum breaking into a rough pulse. A warning flashed amber on the diagnostic screen. The technician at the console frowned and tapped a key. The engine coughed once and died. The sudden absence of sound left the ventilation fan exposed overhead, chopping the air into slow mechanical beats. Adrian turned immediately. Reset the sensor and restart. It's the third shutdown, the technician said. Same thermal flag. False positive. Clear the history. Daniel's head lifted. He had heard something beneath the engine's final vibration. 2 relay contacts opening out of rhythm, the second one arriving a fraction too late. It was the kind of sound most people would lose inside the larger noise. A mechanic learned to listen for what did not belong. Adrian looked back toward the evidence table and offered a reassuring smile. A routine calibration issue. We can continue this discussion privately while the team handles it. Daniel stayed where he was. Don't clear the history. The technician's hand stopped above the keyboard. Adrian's smile remained, though less comfortably. Daniel, you have been instructed not to interfere with the demonstration equipment. I'm not touching it. Then allow the engineers to do their jobs. Daniel looked at the dark engine, then at the 2 children standing near the yellow boundary line. Lily held the repaired model car against her coat. Noah watched his father with the alert stillness of a child who knew adults were pretending not to be afraid. Move the kids behind the second line, Daniel said. Adrian's assistant gave a thin laugh. The machine is off. The housing is still hot. Daniel pointed toward a faint shimmer above the relay bank. And if they restart without checking the lockout, it may arc. Evelyn glanced toward the technician. Is he right? The technician hesitated. The cabinet is retaining heat. Evelyn took Lily's hand and guided both children farther back. Daniel waited until Noah's shoes crossed the second yellow stripe before turning again to the engine. He did not step onto the platform. Save the service log, he said. Take a continuous video from the screen to the relay bank. Use the thermal camera before anyone opens the cabinet. Adrian folded his arms. You are creating drama around a sensor fault. Then the records will show a sensor fault. And if they do not? Daniel asked. The question was simple enough to drain the room of movement. Marcus raised his phone and began recording. Evelyn nodded toward the technician. Save the log first. Adrian stepped closer to the console. A clean restart requires clearing transient errors. His finger moved toward the control marked clear history. Evelyn placed her hand over the panel before he could press it. Not until the file is copied. Adrian's eyes met hers. You are letting an employment dispute compromise a major demonstration. No, she said. I am letting a shutdown remain documented. The technician exported the log to an external drive, then opened the thermal camera. A red bloom appeared on the screen near the main relay, brighter than the surrounding wiring. Daniel leaned forward just enough to see the temperature values. There, he said. The current is backing up because there's no secondary path. Adrian shook his head. The bypass was removed because it was redundant. Daniel glanced toward him. Removed from what? A pause opened between them. Adrian recovered quickly. From earlier engineering approaches. Many concepts used unnecessary bypasses. Was mine one of them? We have not established that you had a functioning concept. Daniel did not press. He looked back at the technician. Isolate the power. Verify it twice. When the locks were confirmed, Marcus asked what Daniel would need to test his claim. Daniel pointed to the sealed evidence bag containing DM-17A. That housing, a jumper lead, and permission from whoever owns the equipment. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. You believe that burned prototype can stabilize this engine? I believe it may give the heat somewhere safer to go. May? Adrian repeated. You expect us to risk a multimillion-dollar prototype on May? That's why we document it, Daniel said, and why someone else chooses the load. Evelyn studied him for several seconds. He had not promised a miracle. He had not asked the room to trust his memory. He had offered a limited test, controlled by people who doubted him. Marcus chooses 3 load levels, she said. The technician installs the component under Daniel's direction. Daniel does not touch the software. Adrian's voice softened. Evelyn, this is not your decision alone. She looked at him. Then call the person who can overrule me. No one moved. The technician opened the relay cabinet after the temperature dropped. Daniel stood outside the marked zone and described each connection one step at a time. He corrected the technician only once, when the jumper lead was routed too near a heat shield. 2 inches left, he said. Give it room to breathe. When the cabinet closed, Daniel checked Lily and Noah again. Lily's shoulders had lowered. Noah gave his father a small nod. Not proud yet, only steady. Marcus selected 40, 65, and 80% load. The engine restarted. At 40, the readings held. At 65, the relay bank began to warm. Adrian spoke quietly to the technician, but Evelyn made him repeat himself aloud. I said we should stop before this becomes unsafe. Daniel watched the thermal image. Not yet. You do not control this test, Adrian said. No, Daniel replied. The temperature does. At 80%, the red bloom spread toward the main relay. The first contact clicked. The second began to follow late, just as Daniel had heard before. Then DM-17A redirected the current. The temperature line bent downward 3 seconds before the shutdown threshold. The engine kept running. A mechanic near the rear wall lowered the coffee cup he had forgotten to drink from. Marcus stared at the graph. Evelyn's fingers released the chain at her throat. Even Adrian stopped touching his cuff link. Run it again, Evelyn said. The second test used different load intervals and a different technician at the controls. DM-17A stabilized the circuit again. It did not prove Daniel had designed Heart Mobility's entire system. It did not prove Adrian had stolen anything. But it proved the burned component worked, proved Daniel understood the failure, and proved the commercial engine was missing something his old prototype still carried. Adrian stepped toward Evelyn. We should handle the rest internally before people misunderstand. Preliminary data. People misunderstand data when someone removes the context, Daniel said. He turned to Marcus rather than the crowd. Open the earlier shutdown entries. The technician searched the service history. 3 identical thermal events appeared from previous internal tests. Each had been marked resolved. There was no repair note beneath any of them. No replaced part. No engineer's explanation. Only a status change and the initials of an authorized reviewer. Evelyn leaned closer to the screen. Her expression did not reveal recognition, but the technician straightened as though someone far above him had entered the room. Lock the file, she said. No edits. No deletions. Preserve every version. Adrian's professional calm finally thinned. You cannot freeze a corporate system from a community garage. Evelyn took out her phone and dialed a number that required no introduction. I just did. Daniel watched the 3 false resolutions glow on the monitor. The first dated 6 months earlier, the second 8 weeks later, the third only 11 days before the investor demonstration. Someone had known the engine could fail. Someone had changed the record without changing the machine. And when Evelyn ordered a legal hold across Heart Mobility servers, everyone in the garage finally understood that Lily's quiet mother was not merely watching the company's decisions. She had the authority to stop them. The legal hold reached Heart Mobility servers before the demonstration engine had fully cooled. Evelyn's phone remained against her ear as she issued short instructions to someone Daniel could not hear. Preserve every version. Suspend automated deletion. No internal review without an outside witness. The ventilation fans pulled heat and the bitter smell of scorched insulation toward the open service doors. On the diagnostic screen, 3 thermal failures still glowed beneath the word resolved, each one stripped of any explanation for how the problem had supposedly disappeared. Adrian Vale stood beside the console with his hands loosely folded, but a thin line of moisture had appeared above his collar. "This is becoming disproportionate," he said when Evelyn ended the call. "We have an unstable demonstration unit and a disputed prototype. Neither justifies freezing an entire division." Evelyn looked at the screen. 3 identical failures were closed without a repair. Administrative cleanup. Then the records will show who cleaned them. Adrian's gaze flicked toward Marcus Reed's phone, still recording, then toward the security camera mounted above the parts counter. "We should continue this conversation somewhere private." Daniel heard the invitation for what it was, not privacy but separation. Put Evelyn behind glass. Put Daniel outside the room. Let the company decide which facts survived. Before he could answer, Sam Ortiz spoke from the edge of the gathering. "I may have something." The garage owner's voice was barely louder than the fans. He held the office keys in one hand, turning the brass ring against his palm. For years, Sam had kept every invoice because he trusted paper more than computers he did not understand. He had also kept things out of guilt. Documents he could not bring himself to throw away because they belonged to the year Daniel stopped bringing designs to work. "The old storage cabinet," Sam said. "Back office. Bottom drawer." Adrian gave him a patient smile. "Sam, whatever paperwork you have should be transferred to council without being handled further." Sam stared at the banner bearing Adrian's name. "It's my cabinet." He walked into the office. Daniel could see him through the dusty glass partition, moving boxes from beneath a desk, his shoulders rounded by more than age. Noah stood close to Daniel, not touching him, but near enough that the sleeve of his jacket brushed Daniel's work shirt. Lily remained beside Evelyn with the repaired model car against her chest. The wheels were still clean. The adults had turned the garage into a courtroom, yet the little car looked as though it belonged to an earlier, kinder day. Sam returned carrying a gray metal cash box and a cardboard tube sealed with yellowing tape. He placed both on the stainless steel bench. Dust rose in the inspection light. Inside the cash box were carbon invoices, fuel receipts, repair orders, and handwritten notes, bound by cracked rubber bands. Sam found one packet marked October and slid it toward Marcus. The top sheet bore the faded letterhead of Harlan Machine Works. The serial number matched the stamp inside DM 17A. Beneath the description, thermal bypass housing, custom bore, customer supplied dimensions, was Daniel Mercer's name and a payment marked cash received. The date was 10 months before Adrian's Community Innovation Agreement had taken effect at Mill Creek. Adrian did not touch the invoice. A fabrication receipt still does not establish intellectual ownership. "No," Marcus said, "but it establishes chronology." Sam opened the cardboard tube next. Instead of drawings, it held a small videotape in a cracked plastic case. A local station's call letters were written across the label with black marker, followed by the date of Mill Creek's reopening 7 years earlier. "They ran a story on the community program," Sam said. "I asked for a copy because my wife was still alive then. She was in the ribbon-cutting shot." His voice roughened briefly, but he kept going. Daniel was there with the prototype. The station no longer used tape, but one of the younger mechanics found an old combination player in the training closet. They connected it to a monitor with 2 adapters and a cable wrapped in blue electrical tape. The machine swallowed the cassette with a mechanical clunk. Static filled the screen, then daylight appeared. Mill Creek newly painted, the bay doors bright red, Sam standing beside his wife beneath a banner that had not yet faded. The reporter spoke about second chances for workers whose ideas might otherwise never reach corporate laboratories. Then the camera moved past a work table. Daniel appeared 7 years younger, wearing the same navy color he wore now, though the shirt had no oil stain at the shoulder. On the table in front of him sat DM 17A, unburned and complete. The camera caught its crooked mounting hole. It caught the hand-marked code along the housing. It also caught Adrian Vale stepping into frame. "Pause it," Marcus said. The image froze with Adrian's hand resting inches from the prototype. His smile in the old footage was almost identical to the one he wore in the garage now. The reporter's microphone had picked up his voice. "Leave this with us overnight," the recording said. "The sponsor team should see it before finance starts cutting pieces away." The room became so quiet that the videotape player's internal wheel could be heard turning behind the frozen image. Adrian's face did not collapse. He simply removed his glasses, inspected one lens, and wiped it with a folded cloth from his pocket. "I reviewed dozens of community submissions," he said. "That was the purpose of the program." "You said Daniel's concept never moved beyond intake," Evelyn replied. "Informal conversations are not formal advancement. You asked him to leave the prototype for evaluation." Daniel looked at the younger version of himself on the screen. He remembered that afternoon more clearly than he wanted to. Noah had been a toddler. His wife had still been alive, waiting at home with soup cooling on the stove because Daniel had called to say the sponsor team might finally listen. He had left DM17A on that table and returned the next morning to find a receipt for intake but no appointment, no prototype, and no one willing to tell him where it had gone. Months later, the rejection email arrived. A year after that, Adrian's patent application appeared. Daniel could have used the memory like a weapon. Instead, he looked at Evelyn. There were other people in that program. Sam stopped sorting invoices. What? Mechanics. Welders. A school maintenance worker with a battery housing. A woman from the bus depot who designed a safer lift latch. Daniel pointed toward the legal hold confirmation still glowing on Evelyn's phone. "If my file was changed, check theirs." Adrian replaced his glasses. "You are expanding a personal dispute into a conspiracy because a television clip shows me doing my job. Then the other files will clear you," Daniel said. The answer left Adrian nowhere dignified to push. Evelyn reopened her phone and entered a set of credentials that made the technician beside her straighten. A secure archive appeared on the monitor under the Heart Mobility Executive seal. Her name filled the authorization field. Evelyn Hart, Chief Executive Officer. A murmur moved through the workers. Daniel did not react to the title. He watched the folder tree. Community intake contained 12 archived project codes. DM17 was one of them. 11 others had no creator names attached. Marcus opened the metadata view. Each submission had entered the system with a person's name. Each name had been removed only after the project received a positive technical score. "Anonymous review," Adrian said. "Names are removed to prevent bias." Evelyn scrolled lower. The names were present during evaluation. She opened another timestamp. They disappeared after selection. One record showed its creator removed 14 minutes after Adrian's office account opened the file. Another had been transferred into a corporate development folder under the name of a Heart Mobility engineer. A third carried a licensing note despite no payment record to the original sender. The printer in Sam's office began producing preservation copies, page after page sliding into the tray. Then it stopped halfway through a sheet. The silence that followed felt deeper than the mechanical quiet before it. Evelyn looked at the 12 codes as though they had become 12 people standing in front of her. "This wasn't a filing error," she said. Adrian's voice changed by only a degree. "You are drawing conclusions from incomplete metadata in front of employees, children, and an investor. Then we complete it. Privately." No, the word was calm. Final. Daniel placed his palm against the edge of the bench, steadying the old ache that had returned with the video. "Don't restore my name first," he said. Evelyn turned toward him. "Why?" "Because the others may not know theirs was taken." He looked at the nameless project codes. "Contact them before this becomes a press statement. Give them counsel that does not work for Heart Mobility. Preserve their files the way you preserved mine." Adrian's mouth tightened. "You are in no position to dictate corporate procedure." Daniel met his eyes. I'm not dictating. I'm telling her what justice looks like from this side of the desk. Evelyn held his gaze, and whatever belief entered her face came not from pity, nor from the soot on his hands, nor from the years he had lost. It came from watching a man offered proof of his own injury and seeing him use it first to protect 11 strangers. She ordered an independent forensic audit, outside counsel for the original submitters, and a freeze on every patent or product linked to the community files. Adrian reached for his phone. I need to brief my legal team. Place it on the table, Evelyn said. Your devices are now part of the hold. His hand stopped halfway to his pocket. For the first time, the mask did not quite return. Marcus lifted one final page from the printer tray. It was a manufacturing change order approved before DM-17 entered commercial production. The instruction was short. Remove internal source marking from thermal bypass housing. Beside it were the initials AV. Daniel looked from the page to the old video still frozen on the monitor, where Adrian's younger hand hovered over the unburned prototype. There were too many witnesses now, too many dates, too many names missing from too many files. Whatever came next could no longer happen in a closed office, and Evelyn ordered the evidence screens turned toward the public floor of the garage. The evidence screens turned toward the public floor of Mill Creek Community Garage, just as the afternoon light began to fade behind the service doors. Mechanics rolled tool carts against the walls. Folding chairs were placed in 3 straight rows beneath the banner bearing Adrian Vale's name. Parents from the STEM program stood near the parts counter, while representatives from the independent audit connected their laptops to the garage projector. No one raised a voice. No one needed to. Every scrape of a chair leg and every click of a keyboard carried through the room as if the concrete itself were listening. Daniel Mercer remained beside his battered red toolbox. His navy work shirt darkened with sweat between the shoulders. He had not changed clothes or washed the grease from his hands. Noah stood close to him, holding the white-stitched rag Daniel had used that morning. Lily stayed behind Evelyn, the repaired model car, tucked beneath one arm and the red pencil in her other hand. On the stainless steel bench, sealed beneath clear plastic, lay the folded drawing that had started everything. Marcus Reed faced the gathering. This is not a trial, he said. It is a preservation review. We will establish what each record shows, what it does not show, and what requires outside investigation. Adrian stood beneath the banner in his charcoal suit, composed again. His phone and laptop had been secured, but he carried a printed folder prepared by Heart Mobility's internal legal office before the legal hold reached them. That distinction matters, he said, because preliminary records can create damaging impressions when presented without context. Evelyn did not respond. She stood near the projector controls, watching him with the guarded stillness of someone waiting to see which story a man chose when every easy exit had closed. Marcus began with the drawing. He displayed the front first. Daniel, Noah, and the little red car in Lily's uneven pencil lines. Lily lowered her eyes when the image filled the screen. Daniel noticed and stepped forward. Don't show that side again, he said. Marcus glanced toward him. It establishes how the document arrived. You have photographs. Use the technical side. That picture belongs to her. A murmur moved through the chairs, then faded. Daniel had just asked them to hide the most emotionally powerful image supporting his story. Evelyn looked at him, and something in her expression softened without becoming trust. Marcus turned the paper over on the screen. DM-17 appeared beneath the blue signature, along with the faint pressure marks that red meat inventor before cost review. This proves a page bearing Ms. Hart's signature existed in the company document stream, Adrian said. It does not prove Daniel authored the commercial technology. Correct, Marcus replied. Adrian opened his folder. Then we should also review the Community Innovation Agreement. Copies were distributed. Paper passed from hand to hand beneath the fluorescent lights. Adrian explained that Heart Mobility had funded equipment, provided engineers, paid insurance, and supplied materials to Mill Creek. In return, ideas developed through the program could be transferred to the company for refinement and production. Mr. Mercer worked here, Adrian said. He used this garage. He participated in a sponsored environment. Even if he contributed an early concept, the commercial system was created through corporate resources. The explanation was calm, specific, and legally shaped. Several people in the folding chairs began reading the agreement more closely. Sam Ortiz's face lost color. His signature appeared on the final page. "I signed that," he said. "You signed on behalf of the garage," Adrian replied gently, "to keep this place open." There was no deception in giving workers access to opportunities they otherwise would never have had. For one uncomfortable minute, it appeared the documents might rescue him. Daniel had built DM-17 at Mill Creek. Hart Mobility had funded Mill Creek. The agreement granted the company broad rights. A parent in the back whispered that this was how sponsorship worked. One of the donors nodded. Adrian closed the folder and looked toward Daniel with something almost resembling regret. "You may sincerely believe the design remained yours, but sincerity cannot rewrite a contract." Noah's fingers tightened around the rag. Daniel looked at Sam, who stared at his own signature as though it had become a confession. "What date?" Daniel asked. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Excuse me? What date did the agreement begin?" Marcus opened the first page. "August 1st, 7 years ago." Daniel nodded toward the sealed machining invoice. "Read that one." Marcus lifted the carbon copy beneath the inspection light. "October 14th of the previous year. 10 months earlier," Daniel said. Adrian responded without hesitation. A metal housing existed earlier. The functional system did not. Marcus played the local news footage. On the screen, a younger Daniel stood beside the complete DM-17, a prototype, while Adrian asked him to leave it overnight for sponsor review. The broadcast date appeared in the lower corner, November 2nd, still 9 months before the agreement began. Adrian's explanation held. A demonstration object is not a completed commercial design. Our engineers developed the architecture, control software, testing protocols, and manufacturing process. Then the agreement still doesn't own what existed before it, Evelyn said. Adrian turned toward her. It owns improvements made through sponsored resources. Show Daniel's signature on the intellectual property appendix. Adrian opened the folder again. The appendix contains Sam's signature, Hart Mobility's signature, and a blank line labeled Participating Inventor. Daniel's line was empty. Participation was established through employment and facility use, Adrian said. Not according to this page, Evelyn replied. A quiet shift passed through the room. The contract that had appeared to save Adrian now raised a different question. Why create a separate inventor signature line if none was needed? Daniel did not press the advantage. He looked at Sam. You signed to save the garage.
Sam swallowed.
I should have read every line. You were trying to keep 6 people working. That doesn't make it right. No, Daniel said, but it makes it different from what he did. Adrian's face remained calm, though his thumb moved once against the empty place where his cuff link had been secured as evidence. Marcus placed the machining invoice beside the agreement, then displayed the archived submission record. Daniel's name entered Hart Mobility's system 4 months before the sponsorship contract. The file showed Evelyn's review note. It also showed the name disappearing after a positive technical score. Adrian stepped closer to the screen. Anonymous review was standard practice. After selection? Evelyn asked. To prevent favoritism during corporate development. Then why was your name added to the commercial file? The question came from Marcus. He opened the manufacturing transfer record. Adrian Vale appeared as lead inventor. Daniel Mercer appeared nowhere. Adrian took a breath. Because I directed the engineering team responsible for making the concept viable. And the source marking? Marcus displayed the change order. Remove internal source marking from thermal bypass housing. Initials AV brand consistency, Adrian said. You had no product name yet, Daniel replied. Internal standardization. Then why call it source marking instead of prototype marking? Adrian's gaze moved toward the crowd, measuring the effect. This is precisely why technical language should not be interpreted by people outside the development process. The dismissal was subtle, but every mechanic in the room heard it. Daniel did not answer for them. He reached for none of the papers. "Play the recording again," he said. Marcus replayed the old footage. Adrian's younger voice came through the garage speakers. "Leave this with us overnight. The sponsor team should see it before finance starts cutting pieces away." Daniel waited until the audio ended. "You knew finance would remove parts before the program agreement existed." Adrian's expression tightened. That phrase was conversational. You knew there was something to remove, from an incomplete prototype, and you knew where it came from. The room quieted again. Lily shifted behind Evelyn, and her model car's small wheel clicked against a button on her coat. She raised her hand only halfway. Evelyn noticed. "What is it?" Lily pointed toward the enlarged contract on the screen. "That page wasn't in Mom's paper box." Adrian looked at her. "You could not know that, Lily." She moved closer to Evelyn, but kept her eyes on the screen. The papers in the box had blue numbers in the corner. "That one doesn't." It was a child's observation, nothing more. Marcus enlarged the drawing's back page. A blue internal archive code sat near its torn edge. The sponsorship agreement carried no such code because it had been created later by a different department. Lily had not solved the case. She had simply remembered what the discarded pages looked like. Evelyn placed a hand lightly on her daughter's shoulder. "Thank you," she said, and did not ask her another question. Marcus moved to the next record, the cost memo. The first line identified the thermal bypass as a margin concern. The second instructed the team to remove it. The third read, "Legacy source must not appear in investor materials." Adrian's professional calm thinned around the eyes. Legacy source refers to obsolete architecture, not a person. Then why erase 17 from the housing? Marcus asked. Because the code had no meaning in production. "It meant something to you in October," Daniel said. Adrian turned sharply. "Your obsession with a part number does not make you an inventor." Daniel held his gaze. "No. The dates, the prototype, the intake file, the test logs, and your own orders might." No one laughed. No one whispered. Evelyn allowed the silence to remain before she spoke. "There is one matter left that the contracts cannot answer." The technicians rolled a second engine stand onto the concrete beside Hart Mobility's commercial unit. On one stand sat Adrian's production architecture. On the other sat the restored DM-17 configuration, its thermal bypass visible beneath the work lights. Independent cameras were positioned above both control panels. Marcus sealed the software settings, while an auditor drew 3 load values from folded slips and placed them face down on the bench. Adrian looked toward the emergency stop. Daniel walked behind the yellow line and checked that Lily and Noah were safely beside Evelyn. Then the 2 engines started together, and the first concealed load number was turned over. The first concealed load number was turned over 40%. Both engines settled into a low mechanical hum, their vibrations traveling through the concrete and into the soles of Daniel Mercer's steel-toed boots. On the left, Hart Mobility's commercial system held steady beneath a polished silver cover. On the right, the restored DM-17 configuration ran with its thermal bypass visible under the white work lights, plain and unfinished beside the product that had earned Adrian Vale his reputation. 40%, the auditor said. "Temperatures stable." "Proceed," Marcus Reed replied. The second slip opened at 60%. Cooling fans rose in pitch. Thin red lines began climbing across the thermal monitors, while the independent cameras recorded the control panels, relay housings, and sealed software settings. No one spoke except the auditor. Daniel stood behind the yellow safety line with his hands resting loosely at his sides. He did not watch Adrian. He watched the heat. Lily held her repaired model car against her coat, and Noah gripped the white-stitched shop rag in both hands. Evelyn remained between the children and the test platform, her face reflected faintly in the dark glass of the diagnostic screen. "Commercial unit approaching the first warning band," the technician said. "DM-17 holding below it." Adrian's voice came from beneath the banner that still carried his name. "Both systems are operating within acceptable variance." Marcus did not look away from the monitors. The test continues. The final slip was turned over. 80%. The engines deepened into a harder, rougher note. A faint smell of heated insulation spread through the garage. On the commercial unit, the temperature line crossed amber. The first relay snapped open. Daniel heard it clearly. One click. Then a pause too long to belong. The second relay struck late, sharp as a knuckle against glass. Thermal rise accelerating, the technician said. Hold the load, the auditor ordered. That is unnecessary, Adrian said. The condition has already exceeded normal field use. Daniel's eyes stayed on the graph. The fleet specifications say otherwise. Adrian turned toward him. You are not authorized to interpret those specifications. They're on the screen. 3 short sentences. Then the room fell back into the sound of fans, engines, and measured breathing. The commercial temperature line climbed toward red. On the DM-17 stand, current moved through the bypass Daniel had designed 7 years earlier. The secondary path opened. The heat curve bent downward. The engine continued running. The commercial system did not. Its relay bank clicked twice more. The warning panel flashed, and the engine shut down with a violent loss of sound. The remaining DM-17 unit kept humming beside it. No celebration followed. No applause. The silence was too complete for victory. Marcus leaned toward the event recorder. Mark the shutdown time. The technician entered it, then opened the captured log. A fault code appeared, followed by a line Daniel had not seen in the earlier service records. Warning class reduced by configuration override. Evelyn stepped closer. Open the change history. Adrian moved before anyone else did. That software field is not relevant to authorship. It is relevant to safety, Daniel said. Marcus clicked the history tab. The projector displayed a sequence of configuration changes made 6 months before the investor demonstration. The original system classified the thermal event as a mandatory shutdown requiring engineering review. A later change lowered it to an intermittent sensor advisory. The authorization code matched the manufacturing cost project referenced in Adrian's memo. Evelyn read the entry twice. Who approved this? The technician expanded the field. The initials were AV. Adrian's mouth opened, but his voice arrived dry. Approval initials do not establish that I personally entered the change. My office authorized hundreds of configuration decisions. Then the supporting request should identify the engineer, Marcus said. He opened the attached file. The cost memo appeared again, now with an appendix that had not printed during the earlier preservation run. Remove thermal bypass to preserve margin. Lower field alert to prevent false service events. Legacy source must not appear in investor materials. Adrian stared at the screen. His hand reached instinctively toward the place where his phone would normally have been. Finding nothing, his fingers closed around air. That language is being read without technical context, he said. Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on him. What was the documented failure rate? There was no confirmed field failure. That was not my question. Adrian swallowed. The fans above them turned slowly, pushing warm air through the garage. A sheet of paper slid from the edge of the evidence table and settled against the concrete. No one bent to retrieve it. The modeled event was statistically insignificant, Adrian said. What rate? Marcus repeated. Adrian looked toward the independent cameras, then away. Approximately 1 in 10,000 under extreme thermal load. The sentence left his mouth before he seemed to understand what it had admitted. No one had mentioned a calculated rate. No public document showed one. Adrian had just confirmed that the danger had been measured before the system was promoted as resolved. Evelyn's hand lowered from the chain at her throat. You knew. We knew a rare condition was theoretically possible. And you lowered the warning to prevent unnecessary shutdowns and removed the bypass. It was too expensive for a failure that might never happen. The final word faded into the garage. Daniel looked at the list of fleet recipients on the side monitor: school transportation contractors, municipal service vehicles, emergency maintenance units. He walked to the emergency controls and shut down the surviving DM-17 engine before approaching the hot equipment. He checked the isolation light, opened the ventilation louvers, and asked the technicians to keep everyone behind the boundary until the housings cooled. Only then did he face Evelyn. "Call the fleets." Adrian gave a breathless, disbelieving laugh. "We need a controlled review before creating public panic." Daniel's expression did not change. "Call the people driving them." Evelyn turned to her executive security officer. "Notify every customer on that list. Immediate stop-use advisory pending inspection. Copy the appropriate safety authorities and preserve delivery records." She faced Marcus next. "The investment review is suspended." Marcus closed his folder. The sound of its metal rings snapping shut echoed through the room. "Effective now." Evelyn then stepped into the open space between the two engines. Behind her, the projector showed the drawing Lily had placed in Daniel's toolbox, the blue signature, the code DM-17, and the faint instruction pressed into the paper. "Meet inventor before cost review." "My name is Evelyn Hart," she said, though everyone now understood the weight of it. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Hart Mobility Systems. 7 years ago, I signed a review asking to meet the inventor of this design. That meeting never happened. Daniel Mercer's name was removed. His prototype was absorbed into our development system. The protection he built was later taken out to save money, and the risk was hidden by changing how the system reported failure." She looked directly at Daniel. "Daniel Mercer is the original designer of DM-17. Adrian stepped forward once. "Evelyn, you cannot make a legal determination from a garage floor." "I am not making the final legal determination," she said. "I am preserving the facts and stopping the harm." She ordered Adrian suspended from all duties, his access credentials disabled, and every project linked to the community intake program transferred to independent forensic review. Outside counsel would contact the 11 other creators whose names had disappeared. Patent records, compensation claims, safety disclosures, and internal approvals would be examined beyond Hart Mobility's control. Adrian's shoulders lowered by less than an inch. It was the only visible sign that the structure around him had given way. Sam Ortiz reached up and removed the corner of the Vale Future Engineers banner from its hook. He did not tear it. He folded the fabric slowly and placed it beside the sealed evidence bags. Lily's red pencil slipped from her fingers. It rolled across the stainless steel bench, crossed the projected blue light, and fell to the concrete with a tiny wooden tap. The sound traveled through the entire garage. No one clapped. No one mocked Adrian. No one could find a voice large enough for what had just changed. Daniel bent, picked up the pencil, and returned it to Lily. She looked up at him. "Are you still in trouble?" Daniel glanced at his employee badge lying beside the toolbox, then at Noah, who was watching not the screens but his father. "No," he said softly, "but some people still need protecting." Evelyn approached with an emergency settlement document her counsel had prepared, its first page carrying a number large enough to change Daniel's life. He read the amount, then saw the confidentiality clause beneath it. The garage waited for the man whose name had finally been returned to decide what he would do with the power that came with it. Daniel set the unsigned document beside Lily's drawing and asked for a pen, not to accept the offer, but to begin crossing out the parts that would bury the truth again.